I've done the grayscaling method several times before, and everyone has been asking me how to do it. In the past I've done on fur and also on some skin. I would say skin is a little bit easier because there's just not as many layers and not as detail as required, but fur can be just as easy as you want it to be. Depends on your preference and the style you're going for. If you're going more for a realistic fur, it's going to be a little bit harder than, let's say, a cell shading or even just basic shading. But that's what I want to give to you. I want to give as much detail as I can to the best of my abilities for the grayscaling method. So here I have this tiger sketch. It's just for a commission, nothing big. But I'm gonna open up one of my previous grayscales because, like I said, this is just a basic grayscaling tutorial just for you to kind of get your head wrapped around it, like the whole concept of it and what you have to do and everything. And you can experiment in your own time and, you know, choose what kind of shades of gray you want for it and all that crazy fun stuff. And also you have to make a finished illustration, you also have to include color. Color, which I will cover in a different tutorial. I won't cover it here, but I'll cover it in a different tutorial. And color requires a little bit more layers and way more experimenting than the grayscaling does. I would say the grayscaling part is actually easier, but we'll come to that bridge and cross it when we get to it. So here I have it all line arted, and what I do is I select it with the wand tool and I fill the background layer with a white layer, just sort of so I can see what I need to do, because you kind of want your base and your background to be separate, because you don't want to compromise your base layer with whatever you're doing in the background. So it's wise to make the base layer for your subject or character or whatever separate from the background layer. That way you can have free reign with the background and kind of just do whatever you want with it. But like I said, this is a basic grayscaling tutorial, so we're just gonna try and make this as easy as possible. So I'm kind of referencing the grayscaling from a previous grayscale, and I'm just making the shades the same for this tutorial's sake. So yeah, so your very base layer is gonna be your gray, your very base gray layer, and you kind of want it to be in the middle, kind of like what I have here. And then to add more shading and more detail, you just go either a shade or even a couple shades darker than your initial gray. This gives you a little bit more detail. I'm sorry for repeating myself, I'm just ensuring that you know that this does give you a little bit more detail, and you can kind of flex around a little bit if you want. And I also, if you look on my color swatches to the left on the toolbar, you see I still have the basic gray color that I used to fill the whole tiger with. And that's because I switch back and forth to kind of soften the darker shades. And yeah, if you watch my previous time lapses, you will definitely see that I switch back and forth a lot between the previous gray shade and the current gray shade. It doesn't matter if I'm on a darker shade or on a lighter shade, you can kind of see that I switch back and forth a lot, and that's just to give a little bit a softer look. Now, if your character has markings or something like that, or let's just say your character is a brownish, like a timber wolf. Let's just say your character's like a timber wolf. So they have a lot of darker colors and also a lot of lighter colors on their markings. You're gonna darken the areas a little bit more where there's darker markings. And it'll make sense once you start coloring it, but I'm not going to teach you that right now. What I can do, if you guys don't want to wait for me on that coloring tutorial, because it might be a couple weeks before I'm able to do the coloring tutorial, just because I wanna give you guys another a little bit more advanced grayscaling tutorial before I do the coloring one. And I want to give you, I want to give you a more advanced one with how I do the realistic fur and stuff. And then I'll show you how to color. So it might be a couple more weeks before I'm able to do that for you guys. And if you guys don't want to wait for that, then I will put a link in the description of where I learned the grayscaling tutorial method. And it's on DeviantArt, so like it's totally free to like look at and stuff. And it covers human skin, but it can easily be translated into fur. Like I said, it's really as complicated or as easy as you want it to be. That's why I'm kind of showing you this very basic look at it, just so you kind of get the idea in your head. So I'm following the fur flow that I discussed previously in one of my other tutorials. And this is a cat, and this is just, you know, basic shading. So I just do the basic general flow of where the fur is going, just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of why I'm still going in the fur direction, but it's just not as realistic as it was as I went into that discussion video that I did like a month ago, I think. I'll put a link for it somewhere in the video or somewhere in the description below if you want. But I also go another shade darker, as I still keep the previous shade that I used on one of the swatches. And as you can see, I'm just kind of going back and forth on it. And this with each darker shade, as I'm doing this with the basic shading, with each darker shade of gray, I'm adding a little bit more detail. I'm going further into the fur and I'm giving it more depth. And I'm also creating like little tiny furs that give some you know, some quirks or some tufts of fur in the whole fur pattern thing, because fur isn't just cut and dry as what everyone thinks it is. There's a lot of layers, there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of tufts, there's a lot of clumps. So some fur patterns that are on the stomach or on the neck or on the waist area can be lighter just because they're tufts of fur in some areas. So that's just, it's just how it is. If you decide to cell shade or just make it as basic as you want, depending on your art style, it's totally up to you. If you want to add in the highlights of the tufts of fur, but you totally don't have to. And we would just repeat the process again. I'm not going totally dark on this because, like, I keep repeating myself like a freaking broken record. Oh. I just make it darker, and I just go over the certain areas that need a little bit more contrasting than the others, and I just add in a little bit more detail on certain parts of the fur. And also what you can do is you can, again, depends on what you want to do for your grayscaling piece, you can go so far as to adding a ton of shading that you don't need line art anymore. You can just have your grayscaling take care of that for you, and the highlights and the colors do that for you if you want. So I mean, you can totally get rid of the line arts if you want, but I'm not doing that with this piece. Probably in the tutorial I will give you next week, I will do that. I will show you a little bit on how to get rid of the line art as much as I can. but we'll see. We'll see about that. And I'm just hitting the spots that need as much detail and as much dark intensity as they need just for this piece. I'm following the fur flow, I'm following the shadows where the shadows were most prominent. And I'm creating tufts of fur where they're needed. I'm also going back and forth on the swatches to soften certain parts of the shading to give it a little bit more fur length and fur strokes. Okay, now that we're done with the darkest shade that I'm going to do on this piece, I go back and I'm going to add in highlights. You can make the highlights as light as you want. Your goal is to kind of go towards the white, but that really depends. The lighter shade, you kind of want to make it as light as possible, so you want to start with the lightest gray, light gray, lighter gray, then white, you know what I mean? And but you totally don't have to. You can kind of just mix and change whatever you want. So you don't have to go towards white if you don't want to, unless your character has white markings. Like, let's just say they have like white on like their neck or white on like their back or something like that. Then you want to add in the white, just so that when you color it, the white isn't compromised by anything. It's just white. I mean, you can add in like different shades and stuff to make it a little bit softer and make it blend in more with the fur, but you still want the white to be tufts and to really like obviously look white if your character has white. That's just for like examples. But in this piece, I'm just using the base gray shade to go through and add in lighter tufts of gray. This is just to give it a little bit more of like a shine to it, I guess, just to have like certain fur strokes really pop out and to make it blend a little bit better. As you can see, it kind of pulls the whole animal into not really total realism, but it gives the fur more depth, and it gives the fur a little bit more direction and kind of pop out a little bit. This tiger piece is going to be used for a Chatland website, so it's going to go through like tri-coloring phases, so that's why I'm having the gray, the very light gray strokes pop out. So that's the purpose behind this piece. But I think that's all I have to teach you for today. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment below or message me anywhere really on the internet, as I always say in every tutorial. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!